September 20th, local time, is not an ordinary day for Americans, because on this day, the first votes have been cast in the 2024 US election. This is early live voting in the US election, and Minnesota, South Dakota, and Virginia are the first 3 states to start early live voting. At the polls, long lines of voters have formed. Early voting is one of the electoral systems in the United States. More than a dozen more states will open live voting by mid-October. In 2024, 47 states, the District of Columbia, American Samoa, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the US Virgin Islands will offer live voting before Election Day. Only 3 states, New Hampshire, Alabama, and Mississippi, do not allow early live voting. In addition to early in-person voting, 36 states and Washington, D.C. accept voting by mail. After receiving the ballot paper, voters can return it by post or drop it off at a designated location. In the 2020 US election, about 100 million Americans cast early ballots, accounting for 63% of all votes cast. But since the end of the epidemic, that number has fallen back. Some voters said a big reason they chose to vote early was the fear of possible chaos on Election Day that could affect their right to vote. In fact, early voting has always been a controversial move in the United States. Opponents believe that voters do not receive enough information about the election, which is easy to cause irrational voting, and there is a risk of fraud. Mail-in ballots, considered by the Trump camp to be one of the main ways of election cheating, are even more controversial. Early voting, which began on September 20th, has pros and cons for both Trump and Harris. For Trump, the advantage is that he survived 2 assassination attempts in a row, which can win the sympathy of many American voters. Working in Harris' favor, his debate performance on September 10th was good, and television viewers were moderately impressed. The Federal Reserve has just announced an interest rate cut, easing the pressure on homeowners and high consumers, and laying a good foundation for Harris to promote the next step of economic policy. Undecided voters may simply tick Harris's name and have the final say. In addition, the Harris camp has taken advantage of the advantages of being in office and introduced various measures to promote its own election. According to the most recent US Census records, 68 million people in the United States speak a language other than English at home. To that end, the US government introduced ballots in at least 7 languages, including Spanish, Tagalog, Chinese, Herman, Vietnamese, Korean, and a range of Native American languages. Some states can also print ballots in another language for field voters. That helps Democrats, who rely heavily on immigrants of all races. This time, Harris has received strong support from the big brother behind the money, raising as much as $190 million in August, more than 4 times the $44.5 million of Trump's team. That means the Harris campaign's financial advantage will help it in many ways before the November 5th election. It's fair to say that the Harris team has no qualms about throwing money at it. In August alone, the Harris team spent about $174 million, including $135 million on campaign ads, as they rushed to introduce Harris to American voters in a short period of time. About $6.4 million was spent on salaries and $4.5 million on text messaging. It can be seen that the number of spam messages received by Americans will be large. Harris also won the support of singer Taylor Swift, talk show host Oprah Winfrey, and others who have a huge voice in the United States, and incidentally won the support of their fans. Trump's most powerful supporter is Musk, the world's richest man. Now, US netizens have begun to call the two the Harris-Swift team and the Trump-Musk team, but ignore their running mates. In addition to election methods, voter identity fraud in the United States has also been a topic of widespread concern since 2020. According to an Economist, YouGov poll conducted August 25th to 27th, 2024, 38% of respondents believe that the 2020 election will be rigged. This question is not surprising, given that American elections do not look at ID cards. However, the United States has a large population mobility, and many voters do not cancel their voter registration in time after leaving their original residence, resulting in the phenomenon of ghost voters. To that end, Republican House Speaker Jed Johnson is pushing hard to pass the Rescue Act. By October 1st, registered voters must provide proof of citizenship. If the legislation succeeds, states would require voters to provide proof of citizenship when they register to vote in the November 5th presidential election. This will have a profound impact on the 2024 presidential election. At present, most states in the United States are very stable. Either long-term support for the Democratic Party, called blue states, or long-term support for the Republican Party, called red states. There are currently 20 red states and 16 blue states. Among them, blue states are mostly concentrated in the east and west coasts of the United States, and red states are mainly concentrated in the central Great Plains of the United States. The average percentage of white people in red states is significantly higher than in blue states, and the average percentage of minority people in blue states is significantly higher than in red states. Most high-tech companies in the United States are located in blue states, while domestic companies are mainly located in red states. There are also light red and light blue states, but most importantly, there are 7 swing states. The 7 swing states include the Blue Wall in the north, Pennsylvania, Michigan and Wisconsin, and the Sun Belt in the south, Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina and Nevada. Among them, the 2 most critical battlegrounds, one is Pennsylvania, one is Georgia. As a result, both sides will devote considerable resources to competing for these 2 states. Current polls show that Harris has a 59% chance of winning the 3 Blue Wall states of Wisconsin, 65%, and Pennsylvania, 54%. In the 4 major Sun Belt swing states of Nevada, Arizona, North Carolina, and Georgia, Harris has a 64%, 48%, 35% and 40% chance of winning, respectively. If only 3 of the 7 swing states consolidate the Blue Wall, Harris can get 270 electoral votes, or win a narrow victory. If he were to steal any of North Carolina or Georgia, Harris would be a shoo-in. But what is being said online in the US is a far cry from the pollsters' conclusions. On Harris' X account, many of the positive comments were scathing. Under Trump's post, netizens posted a lot of pictures showing Trump's bravery or cuteness, and did not hesitate to praise themselves. In fact, the United States election turnout is not high, compared with some Western countries, is relatively low. In the last 10 elections, turnout was less than 58%. The turnout of different voters will directly determine the outcome of the election. So to the campaign sprint, get out the vote is the top priority of both parties. At noon on September 22nd, Harris again called out on X, asking for a second debate with Trump on October 23rd. The reason Harris was so fixated on the debate was apparently inspired by the results of their first debate. However, Internet users were not impressed. They pointed out that Harris may have worn headphones disguised as earrings during the last debate and received favoritism from the media. Others suggested that Harris may have been informed of the question in advance of the debate. They said if they were going to debate, they would do it on Fox or X. However, many Americans are more worried that in less than 2 months from the election for Trump, who has been assassinated twice, any black swan event may change the direction of the election and then seriously impact the situation in the United States. So it doesn't really matter who the first vote was cast for on September 20th. Who wins in the end is less important. Perhaps the most important question for Americans is whether the country will survive the election.